Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Virtuzone Academy Q&A on complying with the UAE's new anti-money laundering regulations. While we are waiting for everyone to join the webinar, I'll quickly introduce who we are. My name is Christian Petersen. I'm Head of Marketing at Virtuzone, and I will be moderating today's webinar. And with me, I have my colleague, Victoria Ho. And Victoria, do you want to say a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, so I'm the account manager for the value-added services which we offer at Virtuzone, and I'm here to answer your questions that you have regarding the GoAFL.
Thank you so much. And we recently sent out an email, informing everyone about these new regulations from the ministry, and we have got a lot of questions in return. So we will do our best to answer all your questions today. So thanks to all of you who submitted your questions in advance. We will also be taking questions during the webinar. So on the side of your screen, you will see a chat field. Feel free to put your question there, and we will address it over the course of the next hour. So again, thanks so much for joining. I think let's kick off. So first of all, Victoria, do you mind just telling us and everyone on the webinar today a little bit more about what these new regulations they mean for businesses and entrepreneurs in the UAE?
Yes, definitely. So basically, the rules regarding GoAML is not something new. It has been from the year 2018, which was introduced as a law. And it used to cover financial institutions and exchange houses. But right now, it's they've put on the focus on the designated non-financial companies, and that's where the Ministry of Economy is encouraging such companies to ensure that they register for the GoAML, and also to see if they're falling under any of the activities that they have mentioned below. So that's how it is. And yes, the Ministry of Economy has made it mandatory that each company should assess to see if they fall under any of the activities, and they will have to take a decision or even discuss it with their compliance officer, and then they have to go ahead and register in the system.
All right. And what's sort of the process you have to go through in order to register your company, and also where do you do the registration?
All right, so first step is you need to assess and see if your company falls under any of the activities that's mentioned as per the new regulations. It's a very straightforward activity, which is the real estate brokers and agents. Then you've got dealers in precious metals, and then you've got the lawyers, auditors, and accountants, and the last class is the company corporate service providers. And each company will have to assess itself because they know best what kind of business transactions that happens within the business. And after they assess themselves, then they need to go onto the Ministry of Economy link. And there are two phases for the registration, which is the pre-registration phase and the registration phase. And there is a detailed guideline on the link. And I would encourage all companies to go through the guidelines, because if you miss out on any step, then it becomes difficult to complete even the pre-registration phase. So the details are given on the website, on the Ministry of Economy link under the anti-money laundering, and there are even tutorial videos that will guide companies on how to register in the GoAML system.
All right, and I've put the link in the chatter as well. Everyone who's on the webinar, please let me know if you can see it. It should be, I think, at the top of the chat. If you can, then I will post it again. But basically, when you click on that link, you can go and do the registration on the ministry's website. So Victoria, could you tell me a little bit about what happens if you don't register in the ministry's anti-money laundering system?
Okay, so if you don't register on the system, then it can attract penalties, because that's one of the facts that the ministry has highlighted, that if you fail to register within the deadline, then it will definitely attract penalties, and that's starting from 50,000 dirhams. So I would encourage all businesses to please assess your business activities, since there is still 2 more days time, and then you can go ahead and register.
Okay. So I think we have gotten quite a few questions in advance around consultancy businesses and if they had to register in the system. Can you tell us if they need to register or not, or what would be sort of your answer to that?
Right. So consultancy is a very broad term, and it covers a majority part of business activities. Now here the point is that the ministry would like to see whether the business is performing an activity which is mentioned in their trade license. So if they will stick to the activity that's mentioned in the trade license, then that means that they really will assess the transaction and see that, if they fall under any of the categories that's mentioned. However, having said that, if the transactions are going to get complex and if their customers are in different parts of the world, and then they will have to assess how the money is coming in, where the cash is going out, and the movement of the cash, and also the way that they're receiving the money. So these kind of transactions will have to be assessed, and that's the time that they can see whether the company with the term consultancy, whether do they really need to file under the GoAML or not. So principally, if they're going to stick to the license activity, then they don't have to register. But when they are actually having a business activity which is different from their trade license, they will have to use a substance over form approach so that they can register for the GoAML system.
And I guess for everyone who doesn't know what the substance overflow approach is, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Okay, so substance over form means that to assess and see what are you actually doing in reality. So for example, a business can say that I'm supposed to be providing management advisory services, but in reality, he's providing something else, some other service which is very different from the trade license. Or for example, if they are holding funds on behalf of their clients, so that means you are completely deviating from the activity mentioned in the trade license. So using the substance over form approach, that company will have to register in the GoAML system. So looking at what activity the business has performed in reality, in actual, that's what it means as substance over form approach.
Okay. And if we look at sort of consultancy businesses, would they in general fall under corporate service providers as sort of highlighted by the ministry? Because I know the different types of companies that they say, are categorized as a designated non-financial business or profession. Corporate service provider is one of those. Do you think would consultancies fall under that designation in general, or is that not possible to say?
Actually, Christian, it will be very difficult to answer that question because, like I said, consultancy is a very broad term. It covers many different types of consultancy, and the business owner or the authorized signatory will have to go in detail to find out what kind of consultancy it is, and they will have to find out who are their customers and where the customers are located, how are they receiving the funds. Okay, so in this case, as the transactions becomes very complex, then they will have to register and go ahead in the GoAML system.
Okay, I'm seeing a few people in the chat now that couldn't see the link to the ministry's website, so I've just posted it in the chatter again, and that is where you can go and start your registration. Ross, he has a question that if my application gets rejected, what is the next step?
Okay, so as I mentioned that there are two steps for the registration, which is the pre-registration phase and the registration phase. Now, in the pre-registration phase, you need to enter the compliance officer details, or if you don't have a compliance officer, then the next one is your CFO or the director's details. Now, the reason why your application gets rejected is probably you entered the wrong information or something that the system did not accept. So it means that you need to start the pre-registration phase once again and start that process all over again. Now, if you face any kind of a technical difficulty, like maybe the system was stuck or you could not input any details, then you can send an email to the who looks after the technical aspect, which is the goaml@uaefiu.gov.ae. So that email is they answer the technical queries, and this email is accessed by the Ministry of Economy. So there's an answer coming directly from them because they can view at the back end as to what is the problem.
Okay. And that email address that Victoria just mentioned, I will put it in the chatter here as well. So in case you have any technical difficulties with your registration, you can email the ministry directly on that email address. And I think you told me earlier today, Victoria, that the ministry has been very responsive to at least to the emails you have been sending them, right?
Yes. The Ministry of Economy is actually very active on emails, and they are responding very fast because they do know it's something new to all the businesses. So they're very supportive, and they are responding to emails. So definitely they are going to help all of us.
Perfect. And I do recommend that if you have any technical difficulties, do send them an email on that email address, because I think at least our experience so far is that it has been a bit hard to get through to them on the phone. I imagine they probably get a lot of phone calls here, so close to the deadline. So do please go and send them an email. Also, if an application gets rejected let's say it gets rejected on the last day, just before the deadline, and you can't then you can't physically get around to submit it until the next day once the deadline has passed, would you then have to pay a fine? Is that possible to sort of specify?
I would advise to send an email first, because especially if the application is rejected, it's better to first send them an email as soon as you receive a notification of the rejection, because there would be a reason as to why it got rejected. And if you miss the deadline, then like I said, there could be a penalty. But in this case, if you've already put in the details and there was a rejection, so there could be a possibility that the ministry could consider that you applied on time, but there was an error and then it got rejected. So I would say that it's better to apply much before than the 12th hour.
So best to apply today. So there's at least
Yes.
a couple of days until
Yes.
the deadline. Antoine has a question here as well, that what if I entered the wrong information by mistake at the pre-registration phase? How will I know when I have registered, or will I be notified if my application was rejected? What sort of the type of response you get from the ministry in a case like this?
Okay, so first of all, in terms of incorrect information, now when you're entering the information and if there was a typo error and you have observed it by yourself after submitting, then you need to immediately send an email, and the email address is aml@economy.ae, informing them that this was the error and this is the rectified thing that you wish to rectify on the registration. So that's one thing. And also, if you do not receive any response from the Ministry of Economy regarding acceptance of the registration or regarding a reference number, because usually when the registration is processed, you get a reference number which comes from the Ministry of Economy. And if you do not receive any reference number, I would advise to send an email to both these email addresses, because they will definitely check on their system as to what happened to the application, whether is it still under process, or did it get rejected, or they did not receive it at all. So in both cases, I would advise to send an email, because they can check on their backend system on what's the update.
I just saw we got a question from Risa as well, asking if it's possible to send the link via email to all the participants afterwards. And yes, we will send you the link to the website, as well as the ministry's email address that you can contact if you face any technical difficulties. So I can see we're getting lots of questions, and a lot of them are very specific to different types of business activities. And I'm aware that there's sort of a level of detail that we're not able to go into, but I think let's go through the questions anyway, so we can give each of you, our suggestions on it. The first question we have is, I have a free zone business registered in the UAE. I offer animal behaviorist services under lifestyle consultancy. Do I need to apply in the ministry's system?
Okay, first of all, you need to analyze the animal behavioral services. Is it being performed in the UAE, or is it being performed outside UAE? And also, if you're going to perform for clients, where your clients are located, how your clients is paying you the money? Is it through the bank or through any other digital means? And also in terms of the area where your customers are located. Now, having said that, this is more in terms of assessing the risk for your organization and also checking if you are at any risk of money laundering. Because the main reason for registering in GoAML is for companies to notify the ministry of any suspicious transactions that they may encounter, which can lead to money laundering. Okay, so for such kind of businesses, they need to assess themselves, are they at risk or not? If they are at risk, how are they going to notify the ministry about it? So the only way is they will register in the GoAML. So that's the main objective of having the registration. So now coming back to the animal behavioral, I would say it's the company first needs to analyze and understand about its customers, about the money that's coming in, and what's the risk that the business is facing. And after analyzing that, then they can go ahead and register in GoAML.
Okay. So I guess probably for a lot of businesses, it's going to be quite tricky for them to assess, the transactions that they are incurring, if they could be perceived as fraudulent or not, and not fraudulent, but in terms of money laundering or not. And how would they go about that? Or would you simply just suggest that look, just register in the system, no matter what, just to be on the safe side? And also in that case, like, what are the implications you could face afterwards? I know there was quite a few questions in one, but let's start out by how can companies assess themselves? Because I know we have everyone who's on the webinar today is an entrepreneur. They're not necessarily a compliance expert. So how would they go about sort of doing that assessment?
Okay, so yes, as Christian said, that all of you are entrepreneurs, but definitely when you're going to start your business, as any entrepreneur would do, you would assess your client first, and you would do a customer due diligence just to ensure where your customer is coming from. Okay, and also what kind of business your customer is into. It's very similar to like how banks would do it when you need to approach them to open a personal bank account or a company bank account. They do a lot of compliance checks. They do a lot of KYCs just so that they minimize their risk of money laundering. So in the same way as entrepreneurs, we all need to be aware of the different types of risks attached to any customer that we face, any customer that we are in relationship with, if not only customer, even the suppliers that we are in relationship with. So I would say that as entrepreneurs, yes, we have to keep this in mind, assessing risk, okay, and doing our customer due diligence. Now, I do know that it's very difficult to do compliance checks and also to get into the details. Now, the only way is like usually companies would get a compliance officer to do their checks for them, to do these details for them. Unless if you have done yourself the KYC checks of your clients and you know who you're dealing with and you know what kind of transactions are going to take place. Now, if you look at it from a compliance perspective, most of the owners are very biased towards the organization. So they try to get on board their customers, even if they feel that, okay, there's a little bit of risk or there's a little bit of threat to the business. But yes, it gets kind of risky when they onboard certain clients like that. But having said that, yes, a compliance officer needs to be appointed, or even a CFO, a chartered financial officer, will have to be appointed just to ensure that everything is in place. And yes, now regarding the registration on the GoAML, it would be safe to register. However, I will tell you what will happen after you register. Now, after you register in the system, your contact details is shared with the Ministry of Economy, which means that the ministry can contact you at any point of time to check whether are you following compliance procedures or not, because there is a anti-money laundering program which is available on the Ministry of Economy website, and it is in the law wherein they need to follow certain areas in the program, and they will give you a call or they will contact you just to make sure that are you following that program or not. And that program covers appointing a money laundering reporting officer or getting it internally, no need to outsource it, and assessing your customers, that is doing the customer due diligence, implementing the risk program and assessing the risk of your clients. So these are the different aspects that they would look at in the program, and also the ministry would see whether are you following those aspects in the program or not. Now, in cases when companies do not do these areas, or they say that, okay, they do not want to do it at all, then that's the time that it can lead to further penalties again. As we have seen in the news, that the penalties ranges from 50,000 to $1 million dirhams. So depending on whatever is the lack of information or lack of any procedure, any policies, then the penalties can vary accordingly.
Okay. I think let's jump on to some of the next questions. So here Anastasia is asking, she has an education license for her business. Would she have to register in the ministry's portal?
Education license, but is the business activity like education consultancy, or is it just a very broad term as education license?
I think she posted a second question here. She has an educational language license operating only in the UAE, and she's only receiving money from the UAE. I don't know if that helps clarify.
Okay, all right. So basically, she is sticking to the activity mentioned in the trade license, and her customers are all within the UAE. So with that information, then she doesn't need to register in the GoAML, because she is principally, she's just sticking to the license. So in real, she's also doing the same thing as mentioned in the license.
Okay, so as long as Anastasia stays to only providing services under the business activity mentioned on her trade license, and as long as her clients are only in the UAE, then she is...
As long as she's also not receiving money. Let's say that some companies, they receive huge amounts of money from their owners, from the relatives, it could mean that the money is just coming into the business from different parts of the world, then those transactions will have to be considered. So if those transactions are not there and your company is clean and your books of accounts are clean, then it's fine.
Okay, perfect. Let's jump on to the next one. So Risa is asking, saying that I'm not clear as to what's required and the process for registering my company. I have a management consultancy. So I guess sort of first, I know you have gone through the process of registering Virtuzone in the system. So what was the type of questions that you had to answer sort of on our behalf, or the type of information you had to fill in when doing the registration?
Right, okay. So actually the most difficult part is the pre-registration phase, because it requires you to get a code from different areas. Okay, so the link is given, like I said, on the Ministry of Economy website. So that's the pre-registration phase. You need to enter your company's details and the registered person's details. Now that person details will either be your CFO, your director, or the money laundering officer's details. And you need to attach the correct documents as mentioned on the website, and it's the Emirates ID of the person who's been appointed as a registered person. Emirates ID, passport copy, residence visa, trade license of the company, and an authorization letter. Then the next step is, once you register, then you have to wait for a while till the registered person receives an email with the username and the email OTP, as well as the person should receive an OTP on his mobile, the mobile number that you will use to register. I believe that mobile number should be a UAE mobile number, an active one, so that you receive the OTP. And then once you receive the OTP, you will have to verify the email address, the link that the registered person would receive, and then you will have to enter all the password and then move forward. So basically these details is mentioned in the guidance book, and I would advise that companies actually print out that book. So that's what I did. You print out the book and you follow it step by step, because if you miss out on anything, then you can just lose the flow and you can lose the process. Okay,
good advice there. So as a follow-up to the question, Reza also, so he has a management consultancy, and he provides services offshore and not on the UAE mainland. Does he have to register in the system, basically?
It's Okay, if he's providing services, it's again a very broad term. It's quite vague. So I would advise that the owner, the business owner, or the authorized signatory assess what kind of transactions it is, and especially if it's offshore, I would assume that the money is coming from different parts of the world and not only in UAE. And also it could mean even probably from risky areas or from areas that is highlighted by UAE. So in this case, then it's always safe to register in the GoAML system. But of course, after registering, you will have to ensure that you follow the rules that's mentioned in the program. That's to assess your risks, make sure that you're having rules, policies, procedures in place for customer due diligence.
Okay, lots of questions coming in, so thanks everyone. We will try to get through all of them. The next one is from Nadal, who's asking, what about a newly registered company licensed as a marketing management company? Does that have to register in the ministry's system?
Okay, that's a good question actually, because the regulations, when it came out, they said it's applicable for even new companies, and it's not just applicable for companies that have been established for quite some time. So in this case, definitely it's a new business, so they do not have any business activity. But that doesn't mean that they're going to stop themselves from assessing any further risks or assessing their future clients. So in this case, I would advise that they don't register for now, but they will have to send an email to the Ministry of Economy to confirm as to for new businesses, do they need to register or not? Because then an official confirmation will come from the Ministry of Economy. Because let's say if they registered in the month of March, they are still within the deadline, which is March 31st. And it would be better to send them an email so that they avoid any further penalties or not.
And should that be to the GoML at UAEF?
It will be at it will be at aml@economy.ae. So. Okay. So this email address is basically for any inquiries apart from the technical ones, for any inquiries that they have, any general inquiries. So even I'm using that email address, but yes, for technical difficulties like your system is not supporting, the web browser is not working, so that will be the other email address.
Okay, and we will share that email address with everyone as well via email afterwards. Next question from Dania, who is asking, does a brand and marketing consultancy fall under the type of service providers mentioned in the communication from the ministry? So basically, do you need to register in the system if you are a brand and marketing consultancy?
Okay, again, brand marketing, if I would say, they might probably be engaged in clients to market their brand. Now, these clients could probably be offshore, as in outside UAE. So those are international clients, and the owner or the authorized signatory will have to assess where the clients are and which areas they are in, and also how they're receiving the money from such clients. So it's more like assessing to see if there's any risk to the company or not. If there's going to be any risk, or if there's going to be any suspicious transaction relating to the business activity, then they can go ahead and register. But if they're really going to stick to their business activity, as mentioned in their trade license, and they've done their customer due diligence, they've assessed the risk, everything is fine, then they don't have to register and GoAML. But I also believe that I think the deadline is, of course, for existing companies, but going forward, all companies that will be set up, I believe that it might be like a mandatory requirement to assess themselves and see whether they need to register and GoAML or not. So that's how it is.
Do we know yet how soon after registering a company, if you set up a company after March 31st, how soon after setting up your business will you have to register in the ministry's portal?
Actually, the ministry hasn't issued any guidelines for that, but I'm guessing that they will issue a circular or a notice soon, because they have notified, actually, they have mentioned that, going forward, they're going to have some more guidances in place. So we don't have any information as of yet right now, but definitely we are checking at the Ministry of Economy website to see if there is any updates.
Okay. Let's move on to the next questions. Roman is asking, and that's actually a bit similar to the previous question, but he is asking if he has a consultant company in the area of personal coaching and brand consulting, and if that falls under the requirement to register in the ministry's portal.
Okay, regarding the brand, it's similar as the previous question. Now, personal coaching is something he would do to individuals. So again, that's on like, if you say personal individual, it could either be in the UAE or outside the UAE, and it could also mean that individuals who are politically exposed persons or any other risky individuals. So in such cases, then again, the authorized signatory or the finance officer will have to analyze and see what kind of transactions goes on within the business, how the money is coming into the business, what kind of business transactions, the nature of the transactions that happens in the business, and then they can go ahead and register once they feel that they fall under any of the activities.
Okay. And I see there's a lot of consultancy entrepreneurs on the webinar today. Because here's another question from Chris, who's asking, do financial consultancies that are not offering audit or tax advice, do they need to register in the system as well?
Okay, financial consultancies. Now, the law states that if you're holding any money from your clients or acting on behalf of your clients, especially in terms of financial consultants, then yes, you need to register under the GoAML. So here, the main purpose is wherein you're acting on behalf of the clients. So you're holding funds, because even in terms of company service provider, the law has specified in detail that only these kind of people will have to register. Now, in his case, in the company that you mentioned, it is only a financial consultancy. Then he needs to assess where his clients are. Also, are they inside UAE? Are they outside UAE? What's the risk that the company is going through? Is it a lot of risk, or are they okay with the risk that they're taking? So basically, I would say that they need to assess themselves, and then they can take on the decision whether they want to register or not.
Okay. Next, Saad has a question, which is a bit related to what we talked about before in terms of do newly established companies have to register in the system. But what he's actually asking is, what if you have a newly established company that doesn't have any economic activity yet? So it doesn't, that hasn't had any transactions, to date. Would you then have to register in the system if you fall within the group or type of companies that the ministry wants to register in the system?
Okay, the first part is if you are falling under any of the activities as per your trade license, then you have to register in the GoAML, because your activity is mentioned in trade license, which is falling under one of the categories. It doesn't matter whether you had a business activity or not, because the registration is for the future purposes. So what happens is, after you register, you will be able to see on the system that there is a report which says reporting of suspicious transactions or reporting of transactions with sanctioned countries. So once you register, it will help you in the future. It's not about the backwards, So in this company's case, it's more of, first of all, he needs to see whether the activity mentioned in the trade license, is it matching the one that's already mentioned by the ministry? Then yes, they have to register for the GoAML, even if there is no economic activity. But if he does not have any activity mentioning which does not fall under any of the categories, then it's fine if he doesn't have to register in the GoAML. But like I said, it doesn't just stop there. I'm sure that the ministry would lay out further guidance and further notes and circulars about what will happen to newly established companies.
Okay. Alexandra has a question. If a business and software consultancy looking after finance processes for systems implementation for customers, if businesses like this have to register in the AML system, because what a company like this basically could do is, uncover, actual money laundering taking place, I guess amongst its clients. Would a company like this have to register?
Okay, so basically that they are having consultancy. Okay, they have a very interesting business activity. First of all, they'll have to see if this really allows them in their business activity in the license, because I think it's quite a detailed business that they're doing, and definitely it will involve a lot of risks because they're dealing with many financial companies, and also it's relating to software. So I would say that the company, the authorized signatory, again, they will have to assess the risk that the company is taking on and where their clients are. Because if you're going to say financial companies, these companies can be located anywhere in the world, even outside UAE or inside UAE. So in such cases, they will have to see and assess what kind of risks they are, because it does not fall under any of the specific activities mentioned in the ministry. But then, like the guidelines say that, each company will have to assess the complexity of the transaction and also see how the cash flow is coming in. So I would advise that the authorized signatory assess the business first and see how the business transactions are, who their clients are, where their clients are, and then accordingly, then they can take a decision to register in the co-AML or not.
There's a question here as well from one of the guests today, asking, given that there is, some ambiguity around what type of, companies that have to register in the system or not, is it better to sort of be, better safe than sorry, in a way that, if you are unsure if your business falls, within any of the categories that have to register, should you just go ahead and register anyway, just to be, on the safe side?
Yes, you can go ahead and register, because the main purpose is actually to report to the economy or to report to the government of any suspicious transactions. Okay, so let's say you register, then of course the next step is where you assess your business, what risks that the business is going to go through, which I think every business owner would do that, just to make sure that to what extent that business can take risk. How are they going to perform the customer due diligence? How are they going to implement all these different policies? Are they going to train additional employees for it, or is the owner going to take it up by himself, or is he going to delegate that responsibility? So these are the things which is very basic, and which I think every business owner goes through. It's just that probably it's not written on document, it's not written on papers, but I'm sure every business owner would go through this process to ensure that they don't fall under any bad terms, or they don't fall under any bad pictures. So it's only a matter of putting everything in place and putting it in a proper document so that it can be shown to the ministry whenever they've asked for it.
Okay. Sarah has a really good question here, actually. So what happens, once your registration is completed? How will the Ministry of Economy monitor and manage things going forward? Is that something we know at this stage?
At this stage, we only know that the ministry will confirm the registration. Like we have received emails confirming that the registration is accepted and it's completed. We can actually log into a portal. So it's basically like a portal, and the portal will give you access on to report of any suspicious transactions, and any fraudulent transactions that will take place. So basically, it's more of notifying the authority, and what happens after that is what we don't know at this stage. But I'm sure that the ministry would take certain action towards it, and they would get in touch with business owners once they find out that there are reports regarding such transactions.
Okay. And Nadal is asking here if the supervisory body is the Ministry of Economy. I assume that yes, since you register on their portal, but yeah. I'm not quite sure what it means, but yeah.
Yes, correct. So basically, companies which is registered in any other jurisdiction apart from the ADGM and the DIFC, they all fall under the Ministry of Economy. And entities that are registered under DIFC and ADGM, they are anyways actually already being monitored for it. So that's why they come under a different jurisdiction, which is mentioned specifically under the supervisory body.
Okay. The next question relates a little bit to what we spoke about before, but I think actually it's a pretty good one. It's Reza that's asking, what if the company is dormant and trade license is only used to basically facilitate, residency and not actually to operate, a business? would a company like that have to register on the portal?
Okay, so for companies that are dormant, then I would advise that actually it's so basically there's no business activity, so it means that they don't have to go ahead and register the co-AML system. But let's say if they change their minds and if opportunities do come across, then the business owners will have to rethink of their business plan once again, and then they will have to again go through the entire process. But currently, with whatever information that's been given, they don't have to register. But going forward, yes, if they do have, they want to do a business, then yes, they will have to register then, considering whichever activity that they fall under.
Do we know for how long a company would have had to been dormant, to not have to, register in the system? Let's say you've had a company for 5 years, it's been dormant for 1 year only, for example, but you fall, within the categories of companies that the ministry wants, to go and register on the portal. Would you then have to go and register in that case?
Actually, at this stage, we don't know the period, the time frame, but let's say that if the company had any business activity, I mean, even in the past, and just for this year, it was dormant, but the intention is they still want to do business, then they would have to register under the co-AML. Because, like I said, the ministry hasn't issued any further guidance, so we would just wait and see what will happen to companies that are actually dormant and there's no business activity. But if they did have business activity in the past, and it's just that because of the COVID, maybe they were dormant, then, but the intention is they will still continue doing business either this year or the coming years. And if the business falls under any of the activities, then they will have to go ahead and register for the co-AML.
Okay. So Alexander has another question here that what happens if you do the first phase of the registration, but not the second phase? Let's say if you, assessed further that you're not part of the DNFBPs, and where can you find the program for AML compliance that the Ministry of Economy will be expecting to review?
Okay, so if you complete the pre-registration phase and you don't want to proceed further, I would advise to send an email to them, to the aml@economy.ae, saying that, okay, you've assessed and you have analyzed that the company doesn't fall under any of the activities and you don't want to go ahead with the registration phase. So they will probably get back to you saying that, okay, the key would be expired. In any case, any OTP that you receive is valid only for 24 hours. So you can use that OTP only for 24 hours. And the link regarding the AML program is actually on the Ministry of Economy website again. If you look on the right-hand side of the right-hand side pane of the page, it will have some more guidance and circulars. It will be one of the links that's mentioned there, and there are quite a lot of documents to read. So in the documents that's mentioned about the guidance on the DNFBPs, you will be able to see the program, what areas of the program that the ministry would check on.
So before we discussed that, if you set up a new business now, even if it hasn't traded yet, you could potentially still have to register, if your business activity falls within the categories that the ministry has mentioned. But does it make a difference if your company has a bank account or not? So let's say if you set up a new business, it doesn't even have a bank account yet, you're only setting it up for, let's say, for residency purposes. Would you then have to register on the portal if your business activity falls within the list of activities that the ministry has mentioned that have to register?
Okay, now there are two aspects to it. Now, practically, when you're doing the registration, they are not asking for bank account details. Okay, so basically, the ministry is not concerned as of now. They are not concerned with the bank account details, the company bank account details. Now, on the other hand, if your activity falls under any of the activities mentioned, so it could be that okay, your first intention was to have the residence visa, but on the other hand, your second intention could be that maybe you could have a business, because if you have any opportunities, then definitely you would go ahead for a business. So in such cases, then that's why you have chosen a business activity, and that business activity, if it falls under any of the activities mentioned by the ministry, then you'll have to register and go ahead for the co-AML. Like I said, this registration is a one-time registration. It doesn't happen like every month or every year. So if you register it now, it could be helpful in the future, especially when you're going to have client prospects.
That's a good point, actually. Do you ever have to renew your registration with the Ministry of Economy, or is it just like a one-time thing and then it's done forever?
So far, the ministry has mentioned it's just a one-time registration. So, which is why I think they are really pushing companies to register by the March 31st. And of course, they haven't mentioned anything about a renewal of registration or cancellation of registration. So it's just a one-time thing because they do know that businesses would have business activities in the future.
Okay. Sarah has another question here that what if your clients are multinational clients based in the UAE? Because I know before we talked about does the money, from, do you have clients abroad? Do you have, clients domestically? Do you have international transactions, only domestic transactions? Mm-hmm. So having multinational clients here, would that sort of potentially trigger any flags? In this respect.
Okay, it could trigger flags because the ministry has issued a list of sanctioned countries. So I would encourage all the business owners to please have a look at that list. It's again available on the website, the Ministry of Economy website, just to be aware and to be sure of what kind of clients and where they're located, and also which all clients you're dealing with. Because let's say, for example, that a country that was mentioned in the sanction list, and if you're having a business transaction with that client, then it could be flagged by the ministry, or it could be flagged even by your bank, either if you're receiving money in your personal bank account or if you're receiving money in the company bank account. So it could be flagged by any of the banks, and then the ministry can, let's say, pick up your company for further investigation.
Okay. And I'll also just like to remind everyone that after the webinar today, we will be sharing the the website where you can go and register on the Ministry of Economy's website. We will send you the exact link via email. We'll also send you the 2 email addresses that you can use to get in touch with the ministry, either if you have technical issues or if you have any sort of questions in general. So you will receive all those addresses afterwards. Vincent has a question here that do we need to register for a non-trading business management consulting venture?
A non-trading business management venture. Okay.
Yeah.
So I would assume from the words, it means that the business is dormant and there is no business activity. But if you're saying management venture, then ideally they would have something in mind, and that's why they have picked on an activity as a management venture. So I would say that since there is no business transaction, then it's fine not to register for GoAML. But of course, we have to wait for further details from the ministry to see what is the ministry's response on such dormant companies, and also for companies who wish to take up business activities in the future. Because there would be a point wherein all businesses would actually have to register in the GoAML just for the ministry to know what kind of transactions takes place within the business.
Okay. Something we haven't discussed actually, but there might be people might be wondering: is there any fee involved with the registering on the portal, or is it completely free?
Oh, it's completely free. It's totally free on the Ministry of Economy, and that's why they've given all the steps in detail. So they're not charging anything. It's all free of cost. Just to ensure that you follow the steps correctly, and then you'll be registered. It can take a while to register, actually waiting for the one-time password or waiting even for the username. So I would say that at least keep a day's time so that you have that much of buffer time to receive all the passwords, and then you can go ahead and register.
Okay. So Vishak has a question here that if I'm sticking to the same business activities as my trade license, which is IT services, and I have 1 or 2 international clients in the US and in Singapore, would I then have to register?
Okay, so principally speaking, as how he's doing the business activity, which is sticking to the trade license. So in that sense, he doesn't need to register for GoAML. But then now he's saying that he's got clients outside UAE. So now he needs to see how he's receiving the money from the clients. And if it is relating to the business activity mentioned in the license, then it's fine. But I would still advise the client to please assess the risk that the company is taking, especially if the clients are located outside UAE.
What if we assume that those two companies, the one in the US and the Singapore, was not clients, but was companies that he owned? And if all three companies transacted with each other, would you then say that he would have to register as well in the system?
I would say he needs to see what kind of transactions. I mean, there would be a reason why the money is being transferred from those companies to the UAE company. And if it is for the purpose of, let's say the UAE company lent money initially in the beginning to these two companies for setting up their own business or for running of the operations, then again, it would, and then the money is just a repayment. So then the company will have to assess and see like how this money, how did the other company generate the money from, and then repaying the money back to the UAE. Because then it would fall under one of the activities that's mentioned as a company service provider. And this deviates from the business activity mentioned in your trade license. So in this case, it would be actually better to register and go ahead for the GoAML.
Okay. Stefano, he has a question here that if you have an existing company now and you don't fall within any of the business, categories or activities that's listed by the ministry, if the situation then changes later on and you take on some of those business activities that are, listed by the ministry, should you then register in the portal, and how soon should you do it after taking on those business activities?
Actually, the ministry is not given any clarity on, let's say, a business that adds on a business activity in the license. But I would advise that after the March 31st, I think the ministry would lay out some further guidance on what will happen if businesses would add on additional business activity. But in my view, I think once the business activity is added on to the trade license, then it would be better to register in the GoAML at that time.
Okay.
Because because one of the documents that has to be uploaded is the trade license. So the Ministry of Economy will definitely have the trade license as a record and for their reference.
Okay. Vincent just had a bit of clarification on his previous question. So what he asked was, if I need to register on the portal if I'm having a non-trading business management consultancy venture. What he meant by non-trading was that they're not trading money, but they're still working. They're active. They are selling their services. I assume that is business management services. Would they then have to register on the portal?
Business management service is actually a quite broad term, because business management could mean that you are arranging somebody to act as a director of a company that's also managing business, or it could also mean that you're providing a business address, or it could also mean that you are providing advice on setting up another company in any other part of the world. Now, these examples that I've given is actually falling within the activities of a company service provider. So if he is falling under any of the activities, then yes, he needs to go ahead and register for the GoAML. So business management, he has to basically go in depth and go in detail and see what kind of business management service it is.
Okay. Two things from Sarah. First of all, very professional, well-run session, very informative, always a pleasure. Thank you, Victoria. So credit where credit is due. Then the second thing, is there a template from the Ministry of Economy to do the risk assessment?
Okay, like I said, there is no template for risk assessment. It all depends on each person, how they want to do it. But if we go through the guidance that's there in the Ministry of Economy, the risks is, of course, there's geographical risk, there's inherent risk, there are various types of risks. So the guidance over there is there in the Ministry of Economy. What are the different risks But it doesn't just stop there. It's not only limited to that. You can have much more risks that you can think of, and you can have a written document. So how the company is going to assess these kind of risks, maybe the market risk, or it could be even the environmental risk, or it could even be the risk of the pandemic, which we just encountered last year. So this is a risk of in the future, if it happens, how is the business going to react to it? So there is no specific guidance. However, there are areas that the ministry has addressed to. So you can take that as a start-off point and then move forward from there.
Okay. So I guess, again, it comes down to better safe than sorry. If you feel like you're within a gray zone, it would probably be the safest thing to go and register. As long as you, of course, can fulfill your obligation afterwards. But at least then you, of course, avoid being subject to any potential fines going forward. The last question I can see right now, and by the way, we still have just a few minutes left. So if there are any other questions, feel free to post them in the chatter. But otherwise, there's one from Vishak, who is asking, for a newly formed company, if I need to inject paid up capital from my personal bank account to my corporate account, do I then need to register? And I guess we could add to that question being, if it does it domestically, make that transfer domestically, is it then any different than if it's an international transfer? Let's say it has international accounts.
Okay, first of all, when you have a company bank account, the banks itself, they have very strict compliance rules, and for sure when they're doing the KYC checks, they're going to check your background. And then the question is if the money comes in from personal accounts. So irrespective whether you put in the money from outside UAE or inside UAE, the banks will check that, where the money is coming from, and they will check your background, which country you belong to, and if you're associated with any of the activities or so on. Now, injection of capital from an accounting perspective, it's treated as a share capital. That's your equity. So it would not be considered as a business transaction, unless if you're going to inject some more funds into the company apart from the share capital. And if I say some more funds, it could be from your personal account, then yes, it will be highlighted that these are something as additional funds which the shareholder would claim from the company later on. And then these are the transactions which potentially could be as a suspicious transaction, especially if it comes from different countries, even if it's from your personal account, because if your personal account is situated in different parts of the world, then it could form part of a suspicious transaction then.
All right. Well, I think we made it all the way to the end. Lots of thank you notes from the guests here, and thanks to everyone really for posting all your questions. I think we have really covered a lot today. But again, I would just like to remind you that we will send you an email afterwards with the link to the website, with a link to the page on the ministry's website where you can go and register for AML. We will also send you the email address that you can contact the ministry on if you have technical issues with filling out the form. We will also send you the email address that you can contact them on if you have questions to AML in general. But Victoria, is there anything sort of final message you want to deliver to our guests here on the webinar?
I would say that first of all, please do assess your companies, because you know best what kind of business transactions takes place in your company. Please do assess the risks that the company takes into account, especially the complexity of transactions, especially if there's a lot of cash, lot of money moving around. Please do assess it and see if your company is falling under any of the activities. And after the registration, please do ensure that you follow the anti-money laundering program that's there. And as business owners, yes, we all assess risks. So we just need to document it and put it on paper and have it filed so that for future purposes. And yes, so this is just a way of fighting anti-money laundering, and we are all in this together. So it should not be treated as something new or something which was unexpected, because it's something that we are all in the same boat, and we are all doing the same thing.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Thanks for sharing all your knowledge today. It has been a pleasure. From what I can see in the chat, it seems everyone else feel the same. So that is great to see. So just please look out for your email in your inboxes. later tonight with all the relevant links and email addresses. Otherwise, we will make the recording of this Q&A today available on our YouTube channel. So if you don't follow us on YouTube, go to YouTube, search for Virtuzone, subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, where we post pretty much daily as well. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time today, and have a great evening. Hopefully, we will see you at the next Academy Q&A. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.